Chapter 11 begins our discussion of the leading function of management. In this chapter, we will describe personality and individual behavior, values, attitudes, and how these affect the workplace. How would you describe yourself? Are you outgoing, aggressive, sociable, tense, lazy, quiet? Whatever the combination of traits will result from the reaction or interaction of your genes and your environment. They constitute your personality. Personality is the stable psychological traits and behavioral attributes that give a person his or her identity. In recent years, many personality dimensions have been distilled into a list of factors known as the Big Five. Pre-employment psychometric testing has grown into a $2 billion a year industry. Companies want to test the soft skills of information technology candidates and use various tests, believing that hiring decisions will be made more accurate and predictive of high performance. But are they really? We'll discuss this shortly. From the textbook, do you wonder if your personality has affected your behavior at work? So here we have the Big Five, or personality and individual behavior. So these are the five personality dimensions. Extroversion, meaning you're outgoing, talkative, social. Agreeableness, trusting, good nature, cooperative, soft-hearted, conscientious, you're dependable, responsible, persistent. Emotional stability, you're relaxed, secure, and you're unworried. And finally, openness to experience. You're intellectual, imaginative, and curious. So let's take a look at this question. Susan loves to go to parties where she talks to everyone there. Susan is probably high in, easy one here, C, extroversion. A person high in extroversion would be outgoing, talkative, sociable, and assertive. Core self-evaluation represents a broad personality trait comprising of four positive individual traits. They are self-efficacy, self-esteem, locus of control, emotional stability, and managers need to be aware of these personality traits so as to understand workplace behavior. And we will describe each of these in this lecture. The first personality trait we are going to discuss is self-efficacy. It is the belief in one's ability to do a task. We have generalized self-efficacy, which represents individuals' perceptions of their ability to perform across a variety of different situations, and it is a career readiness competency desired by employers. But what can managers do? They can assign jobs accordingly. Complex, challenging, and autonomous jobs tend to enhance people's perceptions of their self-efficacy. Boring, tedious jobs generally do the opposite. So develop employees' self-efficacy and generalized self-efficacy by giving constructive pointers and positive feedback. This is a quality that can be nurtured. Employees with low self-efficacy needs lots of constructive pointers and positive feedback. Goal difficulty needs to match individuals' perceived self-efficacy, but goals can be made more challenging as performance improves. Small successes need to be rewarded. You want to monitor employees to avoid learned helplessness by offering guided experiences, mentoring, and role modeling. The second personality trait is self-esteem, the extent to which people like or dislike themselves. If you have high self-esteem, you're more apt to handle failure better, you emphasize the positive, and you take on more risk. Low self-esteem, you tend to focus more on your weakness and may be more dependent on others. So, as managers, with our employees that have low and high self-esteem, what can we do? Well, we can reinforce employees' positive attributes and skills. What are the positive things they could do? You reinforce them, you talk about them. You want to do that by providing positive feedback whenever possible. Or another way is to break larger projects into smaller tasks in projects so they can accomplish it and get the job done. You want to make sure you express an employee confidence in employees' abilities to complete their task. Just those words of encouragement that they can do it, and provide coaching when employees are struggling to complete a task rather than reprimanding them and telling them what are they doing or they cannot do the job. Locus of control indicates how much people believe they control their fate, through their own efforts. So if you have internal locus of control, you believe you control your own destiny. If you have external locus of control, you believe external forces control you. So, if you work with an employee that has external or internal locus of control, what can you do as a manager? So, well, you want to make sure that employees with internal locus of control should probably be placed in jobs requiring high initiative and lower compliance, while employees with external locus of control might do better in highly structured jobs requiring greater compliance. So internals may prefer and respond more productively to incentives such as merit pay or sales commission. Research shows internals and externals have important workplace differences, and as managers, we need to understand that. Internals exhibit less anxiety, greater work motivation, and stronger expectations that effort leads to performance. They also obtain higher salaries. Most importantly, one's internal locus of control can be improved if provided more job autonomy. Emotional stability is the extent to which people feel secure and unworried, and to which they are likely to experience negative emotions under pressure. People with low levels of emotional stability are prone to anxiety and tend to view the world negatively, whereas people with high levels tend to show better job performance. So emotional intelligence is the ability to monitor you and others' feelings, and to use this information to guide your thinking and actions. It was first introduced in 1909, and some claim it to be the secret elixir to happiness and higher performance. It is moderately associated with better social relations, well-being, and satisfaction in both your job and life. You have better emotional control. You have you're conscientious and you're socially aware. So these are some the 4 traits of emotional intelligence and description of them. Organizational behavior, or OB, considers how to better understand and manage people at work. As we learned in Chapter 10, it also tries to help managers explain and predict work behavior so that they can better lead and motivate their employees to perform productively. OB looks at 2 areas: individual behavior, which is the subject of this chapter, chapter 11, and which you will continue to discuss, values, these attributes such as values, attitudes, personality, perception, and learning. And OB also looks at group behavior, which will be discussed in chapter 13. Values are abstract ideals that can guide one's thinking and behavior across all situations, whereas attitude is a learned predisposition toward a given object and directly influences our behavior. Job satisfaction is moderately associated with performance and strongly related to turnover. Unhappy workers are less likely to demonstrate high performance, while happy workers are less likely to quit. This is why it is important for managers to track employees' attitudes and to understand their causes. Attitudes have 3 components. They are affective, in which is basically I feel, feelings of emotions one has about a certain situation. Cognitive, I believe that they have the component of attitude that their beliefs and knowledge one has about a situation. And that final attitude is behavioral, or I intend, how one intends or expects to behave toward a situation. So let's take a look at question 2. The statement, I am never going to eat at this restaurant again, reflects the blank component of an attitude. If you answered A, behavioral, you are right. The behavioral component of an attitude is based on intention. This person is intending not to return to the restaurant. Leo Leon Festinger, in 1957, a psychologist, proposed the term cognitive dissonance to describe the psychological discomfort a person experiences between his or her cognitive attitude and incompatible behavior. How people deal with the discomfort depends on three things. First is importance. Can you live with that ambiguity? And second, control. How much control do you have over that situation? And then finally, rewards. What rewards are at stake with that dissonance? Perception is the process of interpreting and understanding one's environment. The process of perception is complex, but it can be boiled down to these 4 steps that we see here. In the book, we are less concerned about the theoretical steps in perception than in how perception is distorted. Since this has considerable bearing on the manager's judgment and job. In any one of the 4 stages of perception, misunderstandings or errors in judgment can occur. Perceptual errors can lead to mistakes that can be damaging to yourself, other people, and your organization. So these are the steps here that we have. The first one is selective attention. Did I notice something? Then we interpret and evaluate it. What is it? What was that? What is it that I noticed and what does it mean? And then we store it to memory, remember it as an event, a concept, a person, or all 3. And then we retrieve that memory and make a judgment or decision. And what do you recall about it? What do you remember about that attention? There are 5 distortions in perception that we will describe because it is important as managers not to fall into any one of these because, as we mentioned before, these perceptual errors can be damaging. The first one is stereotyping. This is a tendency to an individual the characteristics that one believes are typical of the group to which that individual belongs. For example, if you're a tall African American, do people make remarks about basketball players? If you're of Irish descent, do you drink? Do people believe you drink a lot? If you're Jewish, do people think you're money oriented? Or if you're a woman, do people think you're automatically nurturing? All of these are stereotypes. So along with this type of stereotyping, we have sex role stereotyping, which is the belief that men were preferred for male-dominated jobs and women have harder time being perceived as effective leaders. Along with this, there's also race and age stereotyping. Second distortion in perception is implicit bias, attitudes or beliefs that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. I really don't think that I'm biased, but I just have feelings about some people. That is implicit bias effects. And we, in a recent study, showed that both racism and ageism has impacted hiring decisions. The third is halo effect. This is forming an impression of an individual based on a single trait. One trait tells me all I need to know. As if we needed additional proof that life is unfair, it has been shown that attractive people generally are treated better than unattractive. Attractive members of Congress get more TV coverage and so forth. And or attractive employers are generally paid higher salaries than unattractive ones, and so forth. So clearly, however, if a manager fails to look at all of an individual's traits, he or she has no right to complain if that employee doesn't work out. The fourth distortion in perception is the recency effect, and this is a tendency to remember recent information better than earlier information. Some examples would be an employee recently made a mistake, and it ends up being the only topic of a performance review, or students' course evaluations of professors may be affected by course activity closer to the time of the formal appraisal. So those are examples of recency, something that took effect more recent than earlier, and we focus on that. Finally, there is causal attributions. This is inferring causes for observed behavior. 2 tendencies that distort an individual's interpretation of behavior are fundamental attribution bias, and this occurs when people attribute another person's behavior to his or her personal characteristics rather than situational. And the other is self-serving bias. This occurs when people take more personal responsibility for success than for failure. So an example of going back to the fundamental attribution example would be a study of manufacturing employees found that top managers attributed the cause of industrial back pain to individuals, whereas workers attributed to the environment. Self-fulfilling prophecy, also known as the Pygmalion effect, is a phenomenon by which people's expectations of themselves or others lead them to behave in ways that make those expectations come true. Managerial expectations powerfully influence employee behavior and performance. What can managers do to create positive performance expectations? Well, they can recognize that everyone has the potential to increase performance. They can introduce new employees as if they have outstanding potential. They can encourage employees to visualize successful execution of tasks, and they can help employees master key skills. The lesson for you as a manager is that when you expect employees to perform badly, they probably will. And when you expect them to perform well, they probably will. So it is challenging them in a positive way, pushing them, encouraging them to kind of sometimes go outside of their comfort zone. So research has shown that by raising managers' expectations for individuals performing a wide variety of tasks, higher levels of achievement and productivity can be achieved. So let's take a look at this question. John is interviewing Bambi for a job opening at his accounting firm. He notices that she has several tattoos visible on both arms. He does not believe that people with tattoos can be good accountants. John is engaged in, yes, B, stereotyping. John has already judged Bambi on her tattoos, not on her experience or her knowledge. He has put her in a category in his mind of all people with tattoos cannot be accountants, or someone with glasses instead of tattoos might have more luck with John, or they're smarter. So that is an example of stereotyping. Attitudes are important because they impact behavior. Managers need to be aware to key work-related attitudes. The first one that they need to be aware of is employee engagement, an individual's involvement, satisfaction, and enthusiasm for work. A mental state in which this is basically a mental state in which a person performing a work activity is fully immersed in the activity, feeling full of energy and enthusiasm for the work. Employees more likely to become more engaged when a culture promotes employee development, recognition, and trust. And managers can increase employee engagement with personal resource building, job resource building, leadership training, and health promotion interventions. Key drivers of employee engagement are both personal and situational. Personal factors include personality, both the employees and of the managers, positive psychological capital, human and social capital. Situational factors are job characteristics. Employees like variety and feedback on their performance. Leadership, in terms of leadership, employees like managers who are supported and have a positive relationship with them. The organizational climate, obviously, a positive climate will foster engagement. And the stressors, what are the stressors? The environmental characteristics that cause stressors. All of these are key drivers that impact employee engagement. The second type of attitude that managers need to be interested in is job satisfaction, the extent to which you feel positively or negatively about various aspects of your job. It depends on how you feel about several components, such as the work, the pay, the promotions, the coworkers, the supervision. And this correlates to stronger motivation, your job involvement, your satisfaction, and also if you're happy with your job, if you have good job satisfaction, you will have there will be less absenteeism, tardiness, turnover, and stress. So job satisfaction today is much better, of course, than in the aftermath of the Great Recession. Americans then were forced to work longer hours and often for the same or less pay. Many struck back by suing employers for violating wage and hour laws, or as by forcing them to work off the clock or without overtime pay. The final attitude managers need to be interested in is organizational commitment. This reflects the intent to which an employee identifies with an organization and is committed to its goals. Research shows that a significant positive relationship between organizational commitment and job satisfaction, performance, turnover, and organizational citizenship behavior. If managers are able to increase job satisfaction, employees may show higher levels of commitment, which in turn can elicit higher performance and lower employee turnover. Why, as managers, do we need to learn about how to manage individual differences? So that you can influence employees to do their work. You want to make sure that you evaluate your employees. And in evaluating your employees, this should include their performance and their productivity. So, every job has certain expectations. Some are easier to define than others. And, you make sure that you are performing and evaluating your employees on that. You want to make sure in evaluating your performance of your employees, your absenteeism. Of course, there are absences such as a death, illness, jury duty, and all of that. All of them are legitimate. However, a lot of no-show behavior is related to job satisfaction and absenteeism, and it may be a precursor for turnover. So as a manager, if you notice this, you have to ask yourself, what's going on? Why do I have high turnover? Why do I have a lot of absenteeism? Another thing you should look at as a manager is the organizational citizenship behaviors. According to one description, you want to make sure you include such gestures as constructive statements about the department, expressions of personal interest in the workers of others, some suggestions of improvement, training new people, and so forth. Finally, counterproductive work behaviors. Such behaviors can include absenteeism, tardiness, drug and alcohol abuse, disciplinary problems, but also extend beyond them to more serious things such as accidents, sabotage, violence, theft, white-collar crime. So some 96% of workers say they have experienced uncivil behavior and 98% have witnessed it. So as a manager, you want to take a look at these four things, and if there is, why do we have counterproductive behavior? What is happening? What is happening with our turnover, absenteeism, and whatnot? So you as a manager identify the root of these so that you can eliminate that and have better job satisfaction within your employees. Let's take a look at this question. Herman spends his lunch hour drinking beer in his car in the parking lot. This is an example of what kind of behavior? If you answered C, counterproductive behavior, you're correct. He is not harming himself, but the organization with his lunch habits. So that is being counterproductive, which is the opposite of organizational citizenship. One of the biggest management challenges is a diversity in the workplace. Diversity represents all the ways people are unlike and alike. The differences and similarities in age, gender, race, religion, socioeconomic background, and others. Note here that diversity is not synonymous with differences. Rather, it encompasses both differences and similarities. This means that as a manager, you need to manage both simultaneously. The trends in the workplace will be very diverse. In the 5 categories of the internal dimension that we talked about in an earlier chapter, age, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and physical mental abilities, and one external dimension, educational level, will be ever changing. In terms of age, millennials will replace baby boomers as the largest adult generation by the time you read this. Gender, many more women now work compared to the 1960s. Race and ethnicity, the U.S. population is becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. Sexual and orientation, workplaces are becoming more inclusive. People with differing physical and mental abilities, about 19% of civilian Americans have a physical or mental disability. And educational levels. There are mismatches between education and workforce needs. Almost a quarter of all college graduates are overqualified for their jobs. To help distinguish the important ways in which people differ, diversity experts Lee Gardenswartz and Anita Rowe have identified a diversity wheel consisting of 4 layers of diversity. We have here internal dimensions. These are your human differences that exert powerful, sustained effect throughout every stage of our lives, our age, the gender, ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, and physical abilities. Then we have external dimensions. They consist of the personal characteristics that people acquire, discard, or modify throughout their lives. And this includes education, marital status, parental status, religion, income, geographic location, work experience, personal habits, appearance. Then we have our third organizational dimension, and this is your management. It can include a management status, your union affiliation, your work location, your work content, your seniority, and so forth. So these are, I said 4, but these are 3 layers of diversity that were identified by Garden-Schwartz and Rowe in how we are diverse in our personality. Some barriers are erected by diverse people themselves. In the main, however, most barriers are put in their paths by organization. When we speak of the organization's barriers, we are, of course, referring to the people in the organization, especially those who may have been there for a while, who are resistant to making it more diverse. Resistance to change in general is an attitude that all managers come up against from time to time, and resistance to diversity is simply one variation. And resistance to diversity can be expressed in 6 ways. Stereotypes and prejudice, we talked about this. Ethnocentrism, the belief that your native country, culture, language, and all of that is better than everyone else's. Or another one is a fear of discrimination against majority groups, or your resistance to diversity programs, or lack of support from family. The workforce is changing and employees want flexibility and family leave. They want to work out of their home. So that is a changing thing that's happening. We also have a hostile work environment for diverse employees and is characterized by sexual, racial, and age harassment. So these are some ways that resistance to diversity can be explained. Stress, understanding stress and individual behavior. Stress is the tension people feel when they are facing or enduring extraordinary demands, constraints, or opportunities and are uncertain about their ability to handle them effectively. There are 6 sources of stress. First one is individual differences. Some people are born worriers, just can't help it. Those with a gene mutation known as BD and F, Yale researchers identified that people who chronically obsess over negative thoughts. Others are impatient, hurried, deadline-driven, competitive, and these are your type A behavior pattern, meaning they are involved in chronic, determined, struggle to accomplish more in less time. The other source of stress is individual task demands. Some occupations are more stressful than others. Obviously senior corporate executives are more stressful than your lower level jobs. So low level jobs can be more stressful than high level jobs because employees often have less control over their lives and thus have less work satisfaction. Number 3, we have role overload, and it occurs when others' expectations exceed one's ability. And role conflict occurs when one feels torn by the different expectations of people, important people in their lives, and that you can't meet their expectations. We also have role ambiguity when it occurs when others' expectations are unknown. You don't know what other people's expectations are. So another stress is work-family conflict, and this occurs in 2 ways. Work can interfere with family life, and family demands can interfere with work responsibilities. So it is important to find that work-life balance. Number 5, group demands. When people don't get along, that can be a great stressor. Alternatively, even if you have stress under control, a co-worker's stress might bother you, diminishing productivity. And then finally, organizational demands. An organizational culture that promotes high-pressure work demands on employees will fuel that stress response. In a recent Harvard poll, 44% of working U.S. adults reported that their job is stressful enough to affect their health, and most of them think those effects are negative. So take a look at this question. Your boss expects you to stay late to cover the workload of a coworker who is out sick. but you are supposed to help your mother with some work on her house tonight. You are suffering from, if you answered B, role conflict, you are correct. This is an instance of of conflicting between two important people in choices in your life, work and your mother. There are all kinds of buffers or administrative changes that managers can make to reduce stressors that lead to employee burnout. For example, we have extra staff or equipment. Provide extra staff or equipment during peak periods. Provide extra freedom to make decisions. Recognition of the accomplishments that your employees have made. Give them some time off for rest or for personal development. Assign them to a new position. Do a 3 to 5 day employee retreat offsite for team building activities and so forth. Buffers that managers can make to help reduce stressors that lead to burnout is build resilience. Roll out those employee assistance program. Make the jobs interesting. Make career counseling available. Be supportive. Recommend this holistic wellness approach. And as managers, we have the capability of providing these things that make the work environment less stressful and more to provide employees for more job satisfaction and wanting them to come to work, which in turn lessens absenteeism and turnover of our employees. This concludes chapter 11.